Hi everyone, welcome to Bello's Designs. My name is Catherine and today we're going to be creating this 8x8 card that I am calling Home for Christmas. This is the perfect size card to frame and give as a gift or send to your favorite little person or your favorite person who is young at heart. Let's talk about what we need to get started. Here are the stamps we'll be using for today's project. I have the Stars Miniature LAV 152, Annie and Edward LAV 921, Christmas Night LAV 082, the Mini Holly LAV 510, and the Woodside View Cottage LAV 932. You'll also want to have some scrap cardstock on hand to stamp the cottage and cut it out a little bit later in our project. I'll be using a piece of 7x7 Multifarious Smooth and Supreme cardstock, and I do like this package. It came with 20 pieces, and when I make my 8x8 cards, that gives me 20 cards for just a few dollars. It's a pretty good value. I'll link that in the description box. From my stash, I have this really fun holographic card stock, and I think that'll make a nice mat behind my main image. So I've cut that to 7 1/4 by 7 1/4. And then I have my card base, which is a piece of 16x8 cardstock that I have scored down the middle to create an 8x8 card. We'll be using the Sticker Stencils number 9 Moon Jar collection, and from this collection today we'll be using the cloche. For our inks, I am using the Elements ink by Lavinia in Graphite, Confetti, and Violet Chalk, and a few VersaFine Clairs. So we have Nocturne, Lilac Bloom, and Acorn for the base of our cloche. You'll also want an old makeup sponge just to help blend out that VersaFine Clair. In addition, we'll need some sparkle, and I have the StarBrights glitter in Holographic by Lavinia. I really love the sparkly look to that glitter, and it will match nicely with the mat that we have behind our main image. We'll be adding some extra sparkle with our Uniball Signo Sparkling Gel ink pens. I'll be putting my final card together using my Sweet Petunia glue press. I really love that. If you hadn't added it to your collection yet, I'm going to recommend doing that. I have a watercolor blending brush from my Sweet Poppy set. You'll also want a pair of fine point scissors to do some fussy cutting. I have a Sharpie in case I need that. My fan brush from Bello's. I do really like this fan brush because if it sits in the water or I forget it, I don't have to worry about the wood handle and the paint cracking and splitting on me. I also have an older paintbrush that I'll be using with some bleach, and then finally a few Lavinia blending brushes. And I didn't choose those for any particular reason other than that they go with the colors of the inks that I have chosen for this project. Finally, we'll just need a couple more things. I have a jar of water to splatter some snow, as well as some bleach. I really love the bleached out look that I get using bleach and water together. So let me pull everything together and we'll go ahead and get started. The first step in this project is to go ahead and create the base of the cloche. So lining up the mask from the inside of my stencil with the corners of the base, I'm just going to go ahead and use my Sharpie to make a line just to differentiate the bottom layer of my design. So using my VersaFine Clair and Acorn and my blending brush, let's just get a little bit of ink, and I'm going to swipe it from the edges towards the middle, hoping that it'll create both a wood grain effect, and we'll leave some of it towards the middle a little bit lighter, just so that we can see if it adds a little bit of highlight to our project. So we'll start here. Just come across. And that's the look that I was hoping to get. All right, let's go ahead and lift this up, and we're going to move it up to the next layer of our base. So once again, just lining it up with the corners of the base and pushing it down. Starting with my fine line Sharpie, any pen will work. And we'll just come across, and you don't even have to do that step if you don't want to. I just like the look that I get when I do it. So starting at the corner and just swiping towards the middle. Okay, I like how that came out. Now, one important step is to come back in, and let's go ahead and wipe away some of that ink so that we don't spread it onto our project later on. So I'm just using my stamp cleaning cloth, which is just a small piece of microfiber chamois. And we'll take it off the top of that too. Well, actually, let's just remove this. We don't need that right now. Clean off all the ink off of that. And we actually do need it because we're going to come back with it. And I'm going to place it, once again, lining up the corners. I'm going to turn it upside down and use it to create the ground or the bottom of our cloche. And I want it to remain white for now. So here we have that. Let's bring in our Elements inks. And I'm going to begin with the violet chalk. And I'm just going to add from the outside of my stencil towards the middle, just to start creating the background. To put that aside, and let's come back in with the confetti, and we're going to blend once again from the outside edges towards the middle of our design. Now I'm coming back in with my graphite and one of my smaller blending brushes, and I'm just going to lightly go around the very outside edge of my stencil. Pretty happy with how that's turning out. I do think I want to clean off my stencil. Let's get rid of some of that extra ink. And if you get a little bit on the inside of your stencil, it's only going to add a little bit of extra depth to the inside of our card, so don't worry too much about that. Okay, I think I'm going to add a little bit more violet just to the edges, just to try to mix those colors together and blend it out a little bit. Let's go ahead and dry that off. I'm going to come back in with my brush that I had my confetti on and just take off some of that ink, but using the ink that's already on my brush, I'm just going to brush it across the bottom to add a little bit of pink hue to my snowy ground. So I think we're good with our blending, our inks and our backgrounds. I'm going to put those away. And my next step is going to be to start stamping. So let's come on back with our VersaFine Clair and Nocturne. And the first step that I want to do is stamp my house. So I'm going to stamp that in Nocturne just to give it the image, the background, and let us see where we're going to place everything else. So I'm going to line it up as close to the edge of my jar as I can get it, just to give me lots of room to add my other images. That's the first one. Just clean it off and put it aside. And let's go ahead and stamp Annie and Edward. So what I'm going to do is place them onto my image where I want them to be, and I'm going to stamp them together because I just think that will make it a little bit easier. And I have a little bit of a smudge there, so I'm going to cover that up with Annie just by placing her, oops, right over that smudge. So let's get her in. Still want to make sure she's centered on top of the snow. And all right, there's Edward, and then I'll use my block to go ahead and pick them up. All right, that didn't work out so well. Let me reposition that. So I'm placing Annie over the smudges on my card. And I'm not sure where that came from, if it came from my stencil. I may be replacing those sometime soon. I do really love this stencil, but as you can see, I've used it a lot to make Christmas cards this year. All right, now let's pick them up, and I will ink it with my Nocturne. I'm going to hold it over here because I don't want to accidentally drop it on my card and then have to start over again. It's no fun when that happens. All right, let's go ahead and place her right over those little bits that we were trying to cover. Just going to give it a nice press and a chance to settle in there. And there we go, pretty perfect. All right, the next stamp I'm going to use is the Christmas night stamp. So in order to give this a little bit of a curve, I don't really want Santa Claus going straight across. When I put them on my block, because it is a polymer stamp, you can work with them a little bit and give them a little bit of a bend. So I'm going to start with Santa's sleigh, and as I place the stamp down on my block, I'll just give it a little bend to give it that little bit of a curve, so it looks as though Santa will be flying up and over that rooftop. So I'm pretty happy with that placement. So again, let's just ink that up with our Nocturne ink. Sure it's well covered. And I can see I have a little piece of glitter on that, but I'll touch that up after with my Sharpie if it's needed. So just checking for placement, making sure I have Santa and his reindeer inside of my image. And just go ahead and stamp that. And there we have. You can see we're going to have to add a little bit of Sharpie to that. So I do think I'm going to go ahead and fill that in right now. And I'm pretty sure that any snow we add to this later will go ahead and cover up any imperfections. So I'll just fill that in. There we are, nothing to worry about, never happened. You didn't see that. Okay, let's clean off the Nocturne from the edge, just so we don't end up with it anywhere we don't want it later in our project. Right, the next thing I'm going to do is use a piece of scrap cardstock. This was something I made a mistake on earlier, so I'm going to go ahead and just use that to paint in my house. So let's go ahead and stamp that Woodside View Cottage one more time right onto our scrap cardstock. And that'll give this some time to dry. And we'll stamp that down while we're stamping. And put it aside to cut out. Let's go ahead and bring in our bleach and our old paintbrush. Once again, I'm just using a paintbrush that I don't really mind if it gets ruined. It's not super expensive or important. You're welcome to use whatever paintbrush works for you. So I'm going to carefully take the lid off my bleach and just load it up. And I'll use something to help me splatter, and hopefully we'll get a nice, fine, bleached out, snowy look on our card. And go ahead and add a little bit more. Okay. At this point, you can use a little bit of kitchen paper towels to lift off some of that bleached out ink from the card. And I think I want to add a little bit more. So I'm going to come ahead and add a little more bleach for a third time. And this is a good project to make sure that you're wearing old clothes or something you don't mind if it gets ruined. I'm going to go ahead and let this dry on its own rather than using my heat tool, because I don't want my cardstock to warp before I take the stencil off of my card. So I'm going to leave it for a few more minutes and I'll be back. Now that my bleached out bits have had a little bit of time to dry, I noticed that my house actually stamped a little crooked, and I hadn't noticed that before. So I'm going to use my acrylic chalk paint just to paint a little bit of a snowy hill and see if we can even that up a little bit. So just using the paint that's in my lid and my water, let's see if we can create some snow. There we go. All right, so that's looking okay. What I'm going to do next is come back in with my fan brush and some water, and we're also going to pick up some of that paint to add snow to our scene. Let's give this a little shake. Let's add a little bit of water to that. Just water it down a bit. And a little water to our fan brush. And let's add some water just all over in different places on our card. And then some of the, just going to mix my paint with my water on my fan brush, and we'll add some snowy splatter. Okay. Let's get that all cleaned up. Use our heat tool to dry that off a bit. Okay, now this layer of paint has had a little time to dry. I'm going to add a little bit more. And while it's still wet, I'm going to add some glitter to it. All right, let's give that a little bit of time to dry and set. I'm going to put it aside and clean a little bit of this up, and we'll come back and watercolor our house. While I give this a few more minutes to dry, I'm going to come back with my house that I have stamped and cut out, and let's just watercolor that in. So what I'm going to do with this is use my violet chalk and just work in the lid to get some of that purple, and we're going to do the roof with a light wash of purple. And then also some of the details. So get in here, around the windows. And the door. And I am just picking some of the ink right up off my pad and onto my brush. Okay, and there we have that. And let's move into the confetti. Oops. And just blending from the outside into the middle. So it's a little bit darker on the outside and a little lighter on the inside. Nothing fancy because I am not a great painter. And here we have that. Okay, let's give that a few minutes to dry. And while it's drying, we can check this, and that feels pretty dry, so I'm just going to slide this aside, and we're going to come back to that in a few minutes. And now I'm going to take the inside of my stencil, and what I want to do is just stamp some of my mini holly berries right around the bottom. So I'm not going to worry about it sticking on great. I just want to cover that up. So I've already taken the mini holly and put it on a stamp block, and we're going to stamp that in the Lilac Bloom. So we'll do a few on each side. And one more. I think we'll turn it and have one coming down this way. Okay, and let's do a few on this side. There's one and a couple more. All right, I'm pretty happy with the look of that. So let's go ahead and wipe any leftover ink for the stencil. And carefully pull this up. Okay, and there we go. Now we can add some finishing touches. So what I'm going to use is the glue bottle from my glue press. It does have a fine tip, so I'm going to take it out of the glue gun, and we're going to use just the bottle. And what I'm going to do is just come in and add some bits of glue to these holly berries. And we'll do this side. Right, and then I'm going to add more of my glitter just on top of those glue dots. And a little on this side. All right, so that's the outside of our jar. All right, using our silver sparkle pen, we're going to add some sparkle to the roof line and the top of the windows and doors on our watercolored house. Just to give it a little more shimmer. All right, so there's the roof. Let's get the top of the windows and then the top of that door. Now, before we load up the rest of our card with glitter, I'm going to go ahead and glue it down. Once again, just using the glue from my Sweet Petunia glue press. Just get lots of glue on there. the lid back on while we just let that sit for a moment. And let's go ahead and glue our house right onto our cardstock. I'm going to hold it down for a minute and just give it a minute to set up. We could use a little more right here. All right, and now let's go ahead and add lots of glue all over our globe because we're going to add lots of dazzly, sparkly glitter using our, just right from this bottle. Give this lots of sparkle. Little around the house. And let's add lots of this. Love this stuff. There we go. We have lots of dazzle there. I'm liking that. Let's give it a few minutes to set up and we'll clean up this mess and I'll be back. One last thing I want to do before I call this scene complete is to come back in with my bleach, and I just want to bleach out around the lantern and the candle just to add a little brightness to this scene. So just going to pick up a little bit of bleach on my paintbrush here. And we'll come just around the lantern, give it a little bit of a glow, and right around the top of Annie's candle. And I think at this point, I am going to come back and just touch up the lantern and draw that back in. Maybe. There we go. All right, I think our scene is complete and I'm pretty happy with how that turned out. So let's go ahead and assemble our final card. There's lots of sparkle everywhere here. This room's going to need a really good cleaning in a few weeks. Just right up to the edge, and then lots of extra on the back because I do have this shiny cardstock and I want to make sure that it sticks really well. That looks pretty centered. Wipe off a little bit of glue right there. There we go, our card topper is complete. And let's just tie the whole thing together by adding it to our card base, and it will be ready to mail. All right, and there we have it. It's ready to mail or to put into an 8x8 frame for a gift, whatever you would like to do with it. I hope you enjoyed making this with me today. And if you are not already a member of Del Bello's Designs Facebook groups, please consider joining us at Del Bello's Designs Lounge, where we share our creations that are made using primarily Lavinia stamps, and our other Facebook group, which is Del Bello's Designs a la carte, for all other stamp lines that Del Bello's sells. Thanks for joining me. See you soon.